That's the life story of Rain in the Underlands.
Wow. I'm a big believer in that we write a lot of our stories in our head before they even hit paper. I know that
Yes.
when I'm writing, a lot of it happens probably subconsciously, but then it comes forward and you start,
Mm.
really thinking about it. What was the process for you of getting the story out of your head and onto paper? Like, was that easy? Did you
Well,
find
I
it
think like
difficult?
you, 90% of my writing time was actually thinking time. And I think if you've got a job or you've got kids, that's just necessity. Like there can be a month where I write hardly anything. For example, this month I've had one kid break her arm. I've had another kid knock a couple of teeth out on the skateboard. They've had gastro. Another one hurt his elbow. So I've had to take two kids for x-rays this month. And it's things like that. They just build up so quickly. And before you know it, the month is gone.
Mm.
But in that month, I've actually spent so much time plotting my next book
Mm.
that I sat down to start writing it today when I had a couple of minutes in the car actually while my 15-year-old was getting her braces taken off. So I thought, right, I've got, half an hour, I'll use it.
Yeah.
Always take the laptop with me, always have paper, pen, and notebooks.
Mm.
And because I've spent so much time thinking, because that's just what you have to do,
Yeah.
when it comes to the writing, hopefully you're kind of halfway there anyway. And it's just,
Yeah.
gathering those thoughts together.
You know what I would love? I would love to have an exhibition of all of the female writers and male writers as well, the like original rough copies of their original books, because I have stuff written on the back of McDonald's napkins, Medicare
Mm.
receipts. Like, imagine that if we had this exhibition of everybody showed them, and just
Yeah,
so that people realize this is not a process where you go, I'm going to have 4 hours today where I'm going to sit at my laptop and
yeah.
I'm going to, that is not realistic for a lot of people who are
It's
writers. It's
not.
finding the
And
little pockets of time.
yeah, and that's where you get the little nuggets,
Mm.
because you have thought these like plot holes especially. And I find backstories as well, like my characters are
Yeah.
quite well fleshed out because I've spent such a long time, breastfeeding in the dark, thinking about this fictitious family, so they're
Mm.
quite real. And I
Mm.
think that comes across on the page. But yeah, I've got notes everywhere. Like if you
Mm.
turn over all my I've got a 2-year-old now, you turn over all her coloring pages and there's my scribbles in crayon on the back with notes, and my phone is full of notes. They're absolutely everywhere. And I get really frustrated when I see new writers asking for advice, and quite often editors and writing coaches give the advice, oh, you should write every day to improve your craft. And I think
Yeah.
that's awful advice, because if you can't, and it makes people get really stressed, and then they think, well, I can't be a writer because I can't write every day. And it's nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. Being a writer is as much about thinking as it is getting it down. So yeah, I get quite upset when I see advice like that.
Totally agree with you. And I think it's counterintuitive to think that you will be able to sit down and produce good writing every day. You are not a robot.
Mm,
Chat GPT, whatever it is. I
yeah.
mean, like, creativity is not something that you can compartmentalize and say, I'm going to be creative for exactly 3.25 hours every day between 8
Mm,
o'clock. Like, that it doesn't work. And some people absolutely need a writing routine. I get that. But not all of that is good writing. Some of it might be
mm-hmm.
journaling, some of it might be researching. And I think to beat yourself up because you can't do that is going to really
Mm,
set back creatives who are like me and have squirrel brain. Like my brain does not think in a straight line. I cannot,
Yes.
conceptualize things. Like I will get an idea at 2 o'clock in the morning, and my best writing is done when I don't have a pen or a laptop in front of me. It's when I'm
Absolutely. Yeah, it's always that way. Yeah.
when I'm talking to somebody. So what for you with
I love that when you kind of vague out when you're talking to someone because you've had this amazing idea and you can see them wondering if you're listening, but you're just like, oh.
Yeah, and you're like, how do I like discreetly write that down without looking like
Yeah.
But I've been reading lots of biographies of authors lately, and especially female authors, and I love like some of the biographies where they've been like in the middle of like a church meeting or something, and they've written on the paper like,
yeah, I've lost you.
and they've just ripped off the tablecloth that they've written and put it in their pocket and take it. This is not a new thing. So with your writing process, was there somebody who helped you, or did you find that you just had to kind of figure stuff out on your own? How did that work?
So my educational background is in English. I've got a master's in literary criticism, which I did 20 odd years ago, and I've been an English teacher, and I have been a copy editor in a newspaper in London, and I interned in a publisher's in London, and I've dabbled a bit in journalism over here, and I've also studied editing. So I've got a pretty solid background in the theory. And I wrote I wrote 11 billion drafts of Rain in the Underlands, and I thought, this is it, this is brilliant. And I spoke to Kathy Tasker, who is an amazing Australian editor.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And she said, she's an editor, you need to do a writing course. So it's like, okay. And I signed up for the Australian Writers' Centre. She said it very nicely. I couldn't really take offence. And I did a 12-month Write Your Novel course. And that was with Kathy, and she whipped it up into shape. I mean, the things that she taught me were so invaluable, and they will be for everything else that I write. So that was a great investment. It was quite a lot time-wise, and this was during COVID, and I was pregnant, so the timing was awful. But that's life. So I did that, and then I was pretty sure that it was ready to go.
So I'm a big believer in that editing can make or break a story, and that you have to be very selective with your editor, especially choosing an editor who's writing in the field that you're in, or somebody who gets the story. It is
absolutely,
and especially when you are self-publishing, well, it's a big investment for everybody. But going through this process and having an editor who has improved your story, what advice would you give to other aspiring authors when they say, oh, I don't have the money for an editor?
So, and I know this is true because I have quite recently set myself up as a freelance editor. And I have trained at Capstone Editing College. I was lucky enough to get a scholarship from them a couple of years ago. So I've trained, and I've sat exams and I've done assessments, but obviously I don't have an awful lot of experience. And I would say that if you are self-publishing or you're on a budget, use these new editors, because I will guarantee that they will be so meticulous in going through your manuscript, because they want you to give them a good referral. So they will work within your budget, because you can't charge a lot of money until you've got a lot of word of mouth and referrals. So definitely use them. It's certainly better than having no eyes on it. And I have found that new editors are extremely respectful of your manuscript. So yeah, that would be my big advice for someone on a budget. And if you can't even do that, there are heaps of Facebook groups where you can ask for beta readers and work with critique groups. So there are ways of doing it if you can't invest in an editor or an actual writing course like I did.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And with the publishing process, how did you find that as someone who is independently publishing?
So I'm not one of those people that is staunchly pro self-publishing or really for traditional publishing. I think publishing is changing at a really fast pace at the moment, and I think it's really exciting to be on the forefront of that. But all I'm really interested in is that good books get into the hands of readers, and I don't care what avenue that is in. And I read traditionally published books as well. What I did know, so we had just come out of COVID when I was starting to think about publishing this book, and a lot of small publishers had folded. And I wasn't very confident that as a debut author with I had no social media following at the time. I wasn't on Instagram, I wasn't on TikTok, I didn't have Twitter, no Facebook page, like absolutely nothing. And I went into it very, very naively, and I started to test the waters a little bit, and I sent out a query. And then while I was waiting to hear back, which I didn't, and now I know why, I actually started to research what makes a good query. And then I realized that, you need to start going to conferences, and you need to go to querying workshops, and you need to have, Instagram. And I was so overwhelmed. I had a baby at home. I had just sent my kids off back to school, and they were dealing with the sort of post-COVID isolation issues. And I had a lot on my plate. And I just thought that I can't actually cope with the added stress of pursuing a traditional publishing route at the moment, knowing that the chances of a debut author, and like this is just a silly tale about, farting dragons with a big battle at the end, like I have not reinvented the wheel here. It's just, a fun story with a couple of messages of self-belief. So I thought, I will just back myself. Okay, this is just my time. I'm ready. My book's ready. I'm just going to prove to the world that I believe in myself, and also prove to my kids that if you really want something, you just go for it. You just do it. So I went partnership publishing because I didn't have the time to source my own editor, my own cover artist, my own illustrator, do all the formatting, get the distribution and stuff. I knew that if I tried to do that, it would just be too much. So I used an indie press to do all that, and they were great. The cover's amazing, like it is absolutely stunning. So yeah, and now she's out in the world.
Now comes the next step that a lot of, I guess, aspiring authors don't realize is you have to actually then market your book. You have to actually tell people about it. Like, it's not like writing it is the easy bit. Like writing it, yeah.
Yeah.
We have to like put clothes on and, get out of our jammies and, put makeup on and go and talk to people. And like that is confronting and hard for a lot of people who are just like, I just want to do the writing in my jammy and drink coffees bit.
Yeah.
So how are you coping?
Yeah, it's really
part of it.
To be honest, I was terrified of that bit before it started, because I've been a stay-at-home mum for such a long time. And yeah, like literally I have active wear, and then I have slightly nicer active wear, and that's it. So yeah. I was really scared. I was terrified of getting on social media as well. Like that was my biggest fear. And then I went on Instagram first, and everyone in Bookstagram is so nice and so supportive, and I got so much great advice from other authors and from reviewers, and I've made these beautiful friendships and relationships. I've asked every question under the sun, and no one has ever said, I don't have time to tell you, or I don't want to tell you because you're in competition with me for the readers. Like, it has been amazing. And that's a tip that I would give to any new author, whether you're pursuing indie or traditional. Get on Instagram and make some friends, because it's such a supportive community that you don't have to be that lonely writer sitting at home by yourself. So that was the first, and that gave me more confidence to actually get out in the world and, you know, start doing podcasts and things. And what I have actually found, and I'm so surprised, it's actually quite fun. I'm really quite enjoying it. It's actually quite nice to be doing something different.
Nobody else wants to talk about books with us all the time, except people who are doing
Yes, that's it. Yeah, exactly. You know, they don't get it.
Drone on.
Yeah.
And what about this, and what about this, and like, they don't get it. If you know,
yeah, and there's this whole community.
Yeah, I totally agree.